the courtroom turned tense after a surprising moment sparked fresh debate over the federal murder-for-hire case connected to Dallas rapper Yella Beezy. What many expected to be another routine day of legal arguments suddenly became one of the most talked about developments in the trial, with legal observers questioning whether the defense may have made a costly strategic mistake. If those concerns prove accurate, the consequences could reshape the direction of one of hip-hop's most closely watched criminal cases. The stakes could not be higher. Prosecutors continue pursuing allegations that Yella Beezy played a role in a murder-for-hire plot connected to the fatal shooting of fellow Dallas rapper MO3. Yella Beezy has pleaded not guilty, and under the law he is presumed innocent unless proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Even so, every courtroom exchange is now being examined frame by legal analysts, hip-hop media outlets, and fans searching for clues about what could happen next. The latest courtroom development has sparked intense discussion because some observers believe the defense opened the door to arguments the prosecution may now be able to use to its advantage. Others disagree completely, arguing that aggressive courtroom tactics are a normal part of any high-profile criminal trial and that it is far too early to declare any move a mistake. Until the jury reaches a verdict, every opinion remains just that, an opinion. One thing is certain. This case has become much bigger than a single courtroom battle. It has reignited conversations about the intersection of rap culture, street politics, and the criminal justice system, while placing every witness, every objection, and every piece of evidence under a national spotlight. So what exactly happened inside the courtroom? What did the defense do that has legal commentators arguing across social media? And could this moment influence the outcome of the trial? Or is the internet reading too much into a single exchange? Let's break down the facts, the legal strategy, and why this latest courtroom development has everyone paying attention. The latest courtroom developments have placed an even brighter spotlight on the federal case involving Dallas rapper Yella Beezy, with legal analysts closely examining every move made by both the prosecution and the defense. The intense attention comes because the case centers on allegations that Yella Beezy participated in a murder-for-hire plot connected to the fatal shooting of fellow Dallas rapper MO3. Yella Beezy has pleaded not guilty to the charges, and as with every criminal defendant, he is presumed innocent unless proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Still, the significance of the trial has turned every courtroom exchange into a major topic of discussion throughout the hip-hop community. What has everyone talking now is the growing debate over whether the defense may have made a strategic decision that could ultimately benefit prosecutors rather than their own client. Legal experts often disagree about trial tactics, and many emphasize that what appears to be a mistake during one stage of a case may later prove to have been intentional. Others, however, believe certain courtroom decisions can unintentionally open the door to evidence or arguments that might otherwise have remained unavailable. That possibility has fueled widespread speculation across legal circles and entertainment media, even though the trial itself is still unfolding. Understanding why this moment has attracted so much attention requires looking beyond internet headlines. Criminal trials are rarely decided by one dramatic exchange. Instead, jurors evaluate testimony, documents, physical evidence, witness credibility, and the legal instructions they receive from the judge. Attorneys on both sides constantly adjust their strategies as new testimony emerges, making split-second decisions about when to object, when to challenge a witness, and when to remain silent. Those decisions may seem minor to casual observers, but experienced trial lawyers know they can sometimes influence how jurors interpret the evidence presented before them. The prosecution continues attempting to convince jurors that the available evidence supports its allegations, while the defense remains focused on challenging those claims and raising reasonable doubt. That balance defines every criminal trial. Prosecutors bear the burden of proving every required element of the charges beyond a reasonable doubt, while the defense is under no obligation to prove innocence. Instead, defense attorneys work to demonstrate weaknesses, inconsistencies, or unanswered questions within the government's case. This legal standard exists to protect the rights of every defendant, regardless of the seriousness of the allegations involved. The public fascination with this trial extends well beyond the courtroom because both Yella Beezy and MO3 became recognizable figures within the Dallas rap scene long before this legal battle began. Their names represent more than individual artists to many fans. They symbolize a chapter in Texas hip-hop that influenced countless listeners and helped bring greater national attention to Dallas music. As a result, the case has attracted interest not only from legal observers but also from fans who have followed both artists throughout their careers. That combination of celebrity status and serious criminal allegations has transformed the proceedings into one of the most closely watched cases in recent hip-hop history. Legal commentators have repeatedly reminded audiences that courtroom reporting should be separated from online speculation. Social media often rewards dramatic conclusions, but trials develop over weeks through detailed testimony and careful examination of evidence. A brief courtroom clip posted online may capture only a few seconds of a much longer proceeding. Without the surrounding context, viewers can easily misunderstand what actually occurred. That is why experienced legal analysts frequently caution against drawing conclusions before hearing the complete testimony and reviewing the evidence introduced during the trial. Another factor increasing public interest is the pressure placed on defense attorneys in high-profile criminal cases. Every question asked during cross-examination, every objection raised before the judge, and every argument presented before the jury is examined afterward by legal experts, reporters, and thousands of online commentators. Decisions that appear questionable in hindsight may have been based on information unavailable to the public at the time. Conversely, some strategic choices later become turning points that observers recognize only after the trial has concluded. Because of that uncertainty, many attorneys avoid declaring any courtroom decision a success or failure until the evidence has been fully presented. For now, the courtroom remains the only place where the facts will ultimately be tested under legal standards rather than internet opinion. As testimony continues, both the prosecution and the defense will have additional opportunities to strengthen their arguments before the jury begins deliberations. Until that process is complete, speculation about alleged strategic mistakes remains exactly that, speculation. The final outcome will depend on the evidence admitted during trial, the credibility of witnesses, the legal instructions provided by the judge, and the jury's evaluation of the case. Until a verdict is reached, every development will continue attracting intense attention from both the legal community and hip-hop fans eager to understand how this historic trial will ultimately unfold. As testimony continues, legal observers are paying close attention to the broader strategy being used by both sides rather than focusing on a single dramatic courtroom exchange. High-profile criminal trials often unfold over several days or even weeks, and each witness adds another piece to the larger picture. Because of that, experienced trial attorneys rarely judge the effectiveness of a legal strategy until all of the evidence has been presented. Even so, the latest proceedings have generated intense debate among courtroom analysts, with some suggesting the defense may have taken a calculated risk that could influence how jurors evaluate later testimony. Others argue it is far too early to reach that conclusion, especially while the government's case is still being tested through cross-examination. One reason this discussion has gained so much attention is that every decision made in front of the jury carries potential consequences. Attorneys carefully choose which witnesses to challenge, which questions to ask, and when to object during testimony. Those choices are designed to support an overall strategy rather than win a single exchange. Sometimes a lawyer deliberately allows testimony to come into evidence because challenging it could unintentionally emphasize it before jurors. At other times, attorneys object aggressively to prevent information they believe is unfair or legally inadmissible from influencing the trial. Without understanding the full strategy behind those decisions, outside observers often disagree about whether a particular courtroom moment helped or hurt either side. The prosecution's objective remains consistent throughout the proceedings. Federal prosecutors must persuade the jury that the evidence establishes every required element of the charges beyond a reasonable doubt. To accomplish that goal, they often rely on multiple forms of evidence rather than a single witness or document. Testimony, digital records, financial information, phone communications, and other materials may all become part of the government's presentation. The defense, meanwhile, seeks to highlight weaknesses, inconsistencies, or unanswered questions within that evidence. Rather than proving an alternative version of events, defense attorneys focus on demonstrating why the prosecution has not satisfied its burden under the law. Many courtroom commentators have noted that jurors frequently pay attention to factors the public never sees discussed online. While social media users often focus on dramatic sound bites, jurors observe witnesses throughout direct and cross-examination, evaluating consistency, confidence, and credibility over extended periods of testimony. They also receive legal instructions from the judge explaining exactly how evidence should be considered. Those instructions play an important role because jurors are expected to base their verdict solely on the evidence presented during trial, not on media reports, public opinion, or speculation circulating outside the courtroom. That distinction remains fundamental to the criminal justice system. The public interest surrounding this case extends beyond legal questions because of the lasting impact MO3 had on the Dallas music scene. His death shocked fans and fellow artists, leading to widespread tributes and renewed conversations about violence affecting members of the hip-hop community. As a result, the current proceedings are being followed not only by legal professionals but also by supporters who continue seeking answers about the circumstances surrounding the case. That emotional connection has contributed to the extraordinary level of attention directed toward every courtroom development involving Yella Beezy, who continues to deny the allegations against him. Another issue frequently discussed by legal analysts is the importance of preserving objections for potential appeals. Even when attorneys believe a judge is unlikely to rule in their favor, they may still object to certain testimony or evidence in order to preserve legal issues for future review if necessary. These procedural decisions may appear confusing to people unfamiliar with trial practice, but they represent a routine aspect of criminal litigation. Consequently, what some viewers interpret as a mistake may actually reflect a long-term legal strategy extending beyond the immediate trial. That possibility explains why experienced attorneys often caution against drawing conclusions based on isolated courtroom moments. Media coverage has also influenced how the public perceives the proceedings. Short video clips and brief courtroom summaries can quickly spread across social media, but they rarely capture the complete context of a witness's testimony or an attorney's argument. A statement that appears damaging in isolation may later be clarified through additional questioning, while testimony that initially seems favorable may lose significance after cross-examination. This is one reason legal experts consistently encourage audiences to consider the entire course of the trial rather than relying on individual highlights circulating online. Criminal cases develop through the cumulative effect of evidence, not through a single dramatic exchange. As the trial moves forward, attention will remain focused on the evidence presented before the jury rather than the commentary surrounding it. The prosecution and defense will each continue refining their arguments, challenging opposing witnesses, and presenting their interpretations of the facts. Until deliberations begin and the jury reaches a verdict, questions about whether the defense committed a significant strategic error remain matters of opinion rather than established fact. What is certain is that this federal case continues to attract national attention because of its connection to two well-known figures in Dallas hip-hop, and because every courtroom session brings new testimony that could influence the final outcome. The legal process is still unfolding, and the ultimate decision will rest with the jury after considering all admissible evidence presented in court. As the federal trial continues, attention is beginning to shift from individual witnesses to the overall strength of the competing legal strategies. Every day inside the courtroom adds another layer to a case that has already captured the attention of the hip-hop community and legal observers across the country. Rather than focusing on dramatic headlines alone, experienced trial analysts are examining how each side is presenting its narrative to the jury. That broader perspective is important because criminal cases are rarely decided by a single moment. Instead, jurors evaluate the complete picture after hearing all admissible evidence, witness testimony, and closing arguments. One of the most closely watched aspects of the proceedings is witness credibility. In any criminal trial, jurors are responsible for deciding how much weight to give each witness's testimony. They consider factors such as consistency, memory, demeanor, possible motives, and whether other evidence supports or contradicts what was said. Attorneys from both sides spend considerable time testing those issues during cross-examination. A witness who appears confident during direct examination may face difficult questions that expose inconsistencies, while another witness who initially seems uncertain may ultimately provide testimony the jury finds reliable. Because credibility is evaluated over the course of the entire trial, observers outside the courtroom often have only a partial understanding of how jurors may interpret the evidence. The defense continues emphasizing the fundamental principle that the government alone carries the burden of proof. That standard is one of the cornerstones of the American criminal justice system. Defendants are not required to prove they are innocent. Instead, prosecutors must establish guilt beyond a reasonable doubt through admissible evidence presented during trial. Defense attorneys often remind jurors that unanswered questions, conflicting testimony, or gaps in the evidence should be carefully considered before reaching any verdict. Whether those arguments ultimately persuade the jury will depend entirely on how the evidence is evaluated during deliberations. At the same time, prosecutors continue presenting their interpretation of the evidence, seeking to demonstrate that the various pieces fit together into a consistent narrative. In complex federal cases, prosecutors frequently rely on multiple categories of evidence, including witness testimony, electronic communications, financial records, surveillance information, and other investigative materials when available. Rather than depending upon a single witness, they attempt to show that separate pieces of evidence reinforce one another. The defense, however, works to challenge that interpretation by questioning reliability, credibility, and the conclusions prosecutors ask jurors to draw from the evidence presented in court. The widespread attention surrounding this case has also highlighted how differently courtroom proceedings unfold compared to online discussions. On social media, opinions often form within minutes after a short clip or headline appears. Inside a courtroom, however, legal arguments unfold carefully under established rules of evidence. Attorneys cannot simply present rumors or unsupported claims. Witnesses testify under oath, evidence is challenged through objections, and judges determine what information the jury is permitted to consider. Those procedural safeguards exist to help ensure verdicts are based on legally admissible evidence rather than speculation or public pressure. For many supporters of both Yella Beezy and MO3, the emotional impact of the case remains significant. MO3's death left a lasting mark on the Dallas rap community, while Yella Beezy's legal battle has generated intense public scrutiny because of his prominence in the music industry. The combination of tragedy, celebrity, and federal criminal allegations has created extraordinary public interest. Even people with little knowledge of legal procedure have followed updates closely, hoping to better understand how the justice system handles such a high-profile case. That level of attention means nearly every courtroom development quickly becomes the subject of widespread discussion across entertainment platforms. Legal experts have repeatedly stressed that courtroom strategy cannot always be evaluated while a trial is still in progress. Decisions that seem questionable early in the proceedings may later become important components of a larger defense strategy. Likewise, evidence that initially appears persuasive may lose significance after additional witnesses testify or new information emerges. This uncertainty explains why experienced attorneys generally avoid making definitive predictions before both sides have completed presenting their cases. Trials are dynamic processes, and the significance of individual moments often becomes clear only after jurors have heard the full record of evidence. As proceedings move toward later stages, anticipation continues building over how jurors will ultimately assess the competing arguments. Closing arguments will eventually provide both sides with an opportunity to summarize the evidence and explain why they believe the law supports their position. Until then, each witness, each document, and each courtroom ruling contributes to the larger narrative unfolding before the jury. While commentators continue debating alleged strategic decisions by the defense, those discussions remain separate from the legal standard governing the case. The final outcome will not be determined by online reactions or media speculation but by the jurors' careful evaluation of the admissible evidence and the instructions they receive from the court. Until that verdict is reached, Yella Beezy remains presumed innocent, and the trial continues to be one of the most closely watched legal proceedings involving the hip-hop community in recent years. As the trial moves closer to its later stages, the focus is gradually shifting away from isolated courtroom moments and toward the larger question that will eventually confront the jury. After hearing testimony, reviewing exhibits, and listening to legal arguments from both sides, jurors will be asked to determine whether the prosecution has met its burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That responsibility is significant because every criminal trial requires jurors to base their decision exclusively on the evidence admitted in court, not on media coverage, public opinion, or discussions taking place online. In a case receiving this level of national attention, that distinction becomes even more important. Throughout the proceedings, both sides have worked to shape how jurors understand the evidence. Prosecutors have attempted to present a coherent narrative supporting the charges, while the defense has focused on identifying weaknesses, inconsistencies, and unanswered questions. That contrast reflects the adversarial nature of the American legal system. Each side presents its interpretation of the facts, challenges opposing witnesses, and argues why the law supports its position. The judge serves as a neutral referee, ruling on legal issues and instructing jurors on the standards they must apply before reaching any verdict. Those safeguards exist to ensure fairness throughout the process. Much of the recent discussion has centered on whether the defense's courtroom strategy has strengthened or weakened its position. Some legal commentators believe certain tactical decisions created unnecessary challenges, while others argue that experienced defense attorneys often pursue strategies that are not immediately obvious to outside observers. Trial advocacy frequently involves balancing short-term risks against long-term objectives. A question that appears unsuccessful during one witness's testimony may later support a broader argument presented during closing statements. Because jurors evaluate the case as a whole rather than one exchange at a time, experienced attorneys generally caution against making definitive judgments before all evidence has been presented. Another important element influencing public interest is the emotional weight carried by the case itself. The death of MO3 left a lasting impact on his family, friends, fans, and the Dallas music community. His career had attracted national attention, and many supporters believed he still had significant potential ahead of him. As a result, the federal proceedings have become more than an ordinary criminal trial for many observers. They represent an effort by the justice system to examine serious allegations through established legal procedures while giving both the prosecution and the defense a full opportunity to present their cases before an impartial jury. Meanwhile, Yella Beezy continues facing extraordinary public scrutiny because of both his music career and the seriousness of the allegations. High-profile defendants often experience intense media attention long before any verdict is reached. Legal experts consistently remind the public that criminal charges are allegations, not findings of guilt. The presumption of innocence remains one of the most fundamental protections within the justice system, requiring prosecutors to prove every element of the charges beyond a reasonable doubt before a conviction may occur. That principle applies regardless of the amount of publicity surrounding a particular case or the prominence of those involved. The widespread discussion surrounding the trial also illustrates how differently information spreads today compared to previous generations. Courtroom updates can circulate across social media within minutes, often accompanied by commentary, speculation, and personal opinions. While that rapid flow of information keeps audiences informed about ongoing proceedings, it can also create confusion when incomplete clips or summaries are presented without sufficient context. Experienced legal analysts therefore encourage viewers to distinguish between verified courtroom developments and interpretations offered by commentators who may reach different conclusions from the same events. Looking ahead, the next stages of the proceedings may prove especially significant. Additional testimony, evidentiary rulings, and eventually closing arguments will give both sides further opportunities to explain their positions before deliberations begin. Closing arguments are particularly important because they allow attorneys to organize weeks of testimony into a single narrative for the jury. Prosecutors will summarize why they believe the evidence satisfies the legal standard required for conviction, while defense attorneys will explain why they believe reasonable doubt remains. Those presentations often become some of the most closely watched moments in any major criminal trial. Until a verdict is announced, however, every prediction remains speculative. Neither social media debates nor entertainment headlines can determine the outcome of a federal criminal case. That responsibility belongs exclusively to the jurors after they have carefully reviewed all admissible evidence and followed the legal instructions provided by the court. Whether commentators ultimately conclude that the defense made an effective strategic decision or a costly mistake will depend largely on how the trial concludes. For now, the proceedings remain ongoing, the allegations continue to be contested, and Yella Beezy remains presumed innocent unless and until the government proves its case beyond a reasonable doubt. The final chapter has not yet been written, ensuring that legal observers, hip-hop fans, and the broader public will continue following every courtroom development until the jury reaches its decision. That wraps up everything we know from the latest courtroom developments, but now it's your turn to weigh in. Based on the evidence and testimony that has been presented publicly so far, what do you think about the legal strategies being used by both sides? Do you believe the defense made a costly courtroom decision, or do you think it's too early to judge while the trial is still unfolding? Remember, Yella Beezy has pleaded not guilty and remains presumed innocent unless proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. We encourage everyone to keep the discussion respectful and focused on the facts presented in court. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more in-depth coverage of the biggest stories in hip-hop, the latest courtroom updates, and the news shaping the culture, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications by clicking the bell icon so you never miss a new upload. We follow the biggest legal cases, industry headlines, exclusive developments, and breaking rap news as they happen, bringing you detailed analysis without missing the important details. If you found this video informative, share it with friends who follow hip-hop news or true crime stories. Your support through likes, comments, and shares helps the channel grow and allows us to continue producing in-depth content on the stories everyone is talking about. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. We truly appreciate your time and support. Stay informed, stay respectful in the comments, and keep checking back because we'll continue covering every major courtroom development and hip-hop headline as new verified information becomes available. We'll see you in the next video.